Everybody, welcome to another edition of the IAIB Spotlight for the IAIB Network, iBroadcastNetwork.org. I am Andrew Zarian, and I'm joined by someone that is my internet buddy. We talk online all the time. You've probably seen him on one of my shows on the GFK Network. Brian Brushwood is with us.
I like to think of us as brothers in arms.
We're
both fighting the same battles side by side, trying to conquer old media.
We're internet friends.
Sure, that too. I like brothers in arms. That sounds like we went through a war together.
I'm telling you, this is sometimes very similar to a war. You lose people, you gain people, equipment goes bad. You got to borrow equipment.
There's spies. There's armaments. It's an arms race. Sure.
I just got 12 wires here at the GFK Network, so it is an arms race of sorts.
Yeah, you upgrading to purple arms, which is like, man, it's like that's a whole new level. Now I got to go back and be like, okay, how can we compete with purple wires, people? Come on.
People don't believe that I've really lost my mind with some of this stuff, and I spent about 3 days trying to find purple XLR cables.
That shouldn't be too hard. I mean,
yeah,
right?
But I don't know what I'm doing. Half the time when it comes to this stuff, I'm just looking and I'm trying to find it. Are you
obsessed with keeping all of your wires neat and getting everything just so?
Oh, yeah. Everything is like tagged, labeled, and hidden away in the baseboard. I mean, I've gone crazy with it, and that's why I actually ordered more wires. A lot of our viewers could pretty much understand what it's like when you put everything neatly away, and then you got to tear everything apart for whatever project you're doing. So I've ordered a lot of wires.
See, I'm the opposite. I've got everything like the two shots where I know you could see me and where you could see the background. Everything looks super crisp and clean right here. But if I'm going to enable another camera right here. You could see the horrendous off camera. And maybe this is because I've got a background as a touring stage magician, but like anywhere people aren't looking, it's just a horrendous jumble of wires. It's a rat's nest of,
look at that.
Everything.
It's the illusion of internet television. That's exactly what it is.
You got old Coke cans. You got Mass Effect lasers. You got jumbles.
That's hysterical.
This is the you got a random shot glass sitting there.
So I want to go down the entire career of Brian Brushwood, internet personality, because it's fascinating to me how you started off, because you didn't come off from broadcasting.
No, not at all. And in fact, I feel very much like a fraud. I mean, there are things that there are parts of my experience that translate over to what's happening right here. But to be honest, everything that you've seen from the beginning, it's all because I smelled opportunity, because there's gold in them, their internets, and nobody was looking for it. I mean, the whole journey, before there was Scamschool, before there was anything, before there was even Brian Brushwood on the road, there was my rage at traditional television, because I had a deal to develop something for Court TV, and the person who brought me in left to a different network, and the person who inherited my project just didn't get me at all. And they tell hey, you got to comb your hair, you got to do this, you got to wear this sweater, and then they got something very bland and passed on it, and I just was so mad. I'm like, TV is so stupid.
How did you? I mean, you got on because of the magic, right? I mean, that's how you transitioned into traditional media.
Right, correct. They hit me up. They said, look, we want to do a show about scams and cons. We understand that you have a lecture on this. We understand that you tour with a stage show. We'd love to see what you could put together. And we put together a write-up. They're like, oh, this sounds great. We love your crazy hair, your crazy energy. And then they chickened out, and then they got something that they passed on. And meanwhile, around the same time, it's like you're hearing about the beginnings of Revision 3 Network, and or even before then, you're seeing Leo Laporte do podcasting, and YouTube is blowing up. And I was like, man, everything's happening, and I don't want to wait. And I said, I want to host a show, and I don't care if it's on the internet. In fact, at one point, I signed a talent agreement with a company who is developing content for cell phones. Like before there was even a smartphone or an iPhone, it was like crappy 1-minute videos. And I was pitching them on the idea of me teaching magic tricks on it, because I realized that the medium was ceasing to be the message. It didn't matter if you were on television. There was nothing legitimate about television to me anymore. As long as people knew who I was and I was able to get my content out there, the distribution didn't matter at all. And so that's why I developed Brian Brushwood on the Road, which was basically 20 episodes of me on tour in these little 5-minute vignettes. And then once I had done that, I learned a lot about how to tell stories on the road, how to talk to a camera, because as you know, it's way different to try to keep a one-sided conversation afloat, because
it's awful. It's awful. And I've been doing this for a couple of years, and I could do it, but I hate doing it. But here's the disadvantage you have when you're doing something like that. You're not doing like a radio format where you could kind of pause for a couple seconds and then come back.
Right.
You kind of have to be going.
These ads that you could toss to when you're running out of breath, you're running out of content. Although, and actually, we should talk about that. So I learned how to talk to a camera with these little Brian Brushwood on the Road episodes. And then I wrote up the idea for Scamschool, which I pitched to 3 networks, and Revision 3 was first to jump on it. And when Revision 3 launched Scamschool, like that second or third month in, I was starting to see the same people on Twitter and the forums and stuff. And it was obvious that they liked me, but there's no way that you could get super psyched about a personality that you only see for 5 minutes once a week. You know, you're not going to be a passionate fan. And so I realized it's like, I've got to get into that live broadcasting space. I've got to get into that Leo Laporte territory. But of course, the problem was I didn't have any of the contacts. I didn't have any of the software. And I certainly didn't have any of the experience, because just as the stage show didn't translate into working in front of a camera, working in front of a camera for an edited show doesn't necessarily translate into what we're doing now as internet broadcasters. And so I realized I was like, I've got to find a safe place to be bad, which is why I opened an account on Ustream and started playing with the VidBlaster trial software. And at first, like, I was super stoked and terrified when I had 50 whole people watching at the same time.
So you're looking at around 2007 for, I mean, VidBlaster was new. You're just getting started. So you'd been doing Scamschool for a little bit, and then now you've taken it online. Right. And were you a fan of radio growing up, or currently? I mean, are you a fan of radio that you plunged into this radio format?
I loved. I mean, I listened to talk radio all the time. I wouldn't say I was a fan of it, but I mean, I loved the idea that thousands of miles away in a place where I would never see was a person I'd never meet. And you share this bizarre intimacy as you listen to him prognosticate on something at 2 a.m. as you're, where you're driving somewhere on the other side of the globe. That is magic to me. It's a awesome one-way telepathy, essentially, where it's like somebody bears their essence, and on the other side of the world, a person feels a connection to you. Like, that is awesome. And that's one of the things that you don't get in a live stage show. You get that feedback, that two-way connection, but the problem is it's so ephemeral. You can have an awesome situation come up and have the perfect one-liner in a stage show, and in that moment, it will be electricity, and it'll be the funniest thing that ever happened, and it's gone. I mean, they might remember it the next day. They'll probably not remember it a month from now, and certainly a year from then, it's totally vanished. Whereas if something electric happens on the internet, that survives forever. I mean, that's amazing to me. The idea that one moment, one spark can suddenly become the next viral video hit and hit 300 million views.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, the things that actually get those 300 million views, sometimes I envy them because it's such a simple thing. It's like a cat bouncing off of a couch.
Well, and it's not just that it's a cat bouncing on the couch. It also happened to come out at the right time and happened to be posted by the right connected people. And it happened to have this exact squeaky sound. I mean, it's this weird confluence, because you'll see, I've seen a ton of near miss viral hits. And for the life of me, I could not tell you the science of what makes for a viral hit if my life depends on it. All I have are vague ideas that seem to matter.
So you started BB Show. How did you come up with the concept for it? How did you piece it together? Because that always fascinates me. You're not sitting there doing, a tech news show. You're not sitting there doing one specific topic. It kind of varies. It's a variety show of sorts.
Well, all BB Live Show was meant to be, to begin with, was a safe place for me to be bad. Like, I had so few Twitter followers at the time. There were so few people who were really hardcore fans that I felt like, okay, I could be really bad in front of these 50 people. And if there's dead air, it doesn't matter. This is almost like a video conference session. And so the first episodes of BB Live Show were really kind of trading on the popularity of Scamschool, where I would say, hey, if you have a question about Scamschool, why don't you give me a call? And we had people call in and suggest tricks or ask for explanations about different things. And it didn't occur to us that we really had a show until like 3 months in, when, and I'll tell you, the defining characteristic was somewhere around I guess February or March, we started, like, I called Justin Robert Young, who was editor over at iTricks, and I had met like only once before in real life. And I apologetically
A
said, hey,
hysterical guy, by the way. Funny dude.
He is. Well, but at the time, I only knew him as the editor of the #1 Magic news site out there. And so I apologetically said, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's really bad, but it's like I'm not good by myself. And I just need a guest to kind of bounce stuff out. You want to join me for a night? And he's like, yeah, sure. And it was fun. It was like the conversation kept alive. It's the difference between just monologuing and taking phone calls, which I mean is very, very difficult, versus being able to have this back and forth, this handoff that, for example, like you and I are doing right now. And then at the end of it, Justin was like, anytime you go live, always call me. I will always jump right on. And so he sort of became my go-to guy where it's like I'd call other people, but I always knew Justin was there. And pretty soon, like 3 months later, I was like, I don't think I've done a single show without Justin.
He became your co-host.
Yeah, exactly. And then at some point, the show very much stopped being about magic in any way and instead became about internet culture. It became about the next viral video. It became kind of about setting the internet on fire, where we would come up with these weird schemes to try to cheat dig and take a video and launch it and get it to hit #1.
So here's where it gets fun, though. You've been doing BB Show for a little bit. How do you make the transition to TWiT? How does that happen? Because if you look at it, it's not really this organic fit.
No, not at all. And to be honest, I really owe everything to Colleen, the lovely woman who set up all of the TWiT studio. She's now over at Google. She was a fan of Scamschool, and we actually played Call of Duty together, of all things. And she was like, you should totally be on TWiT. I'm like, yeah, I have a background in technology. I used to design high-end networks for.
Oh, so at this point, you really weren't talking about the tech stuff. I mean, it wasn't out there that you kind of knew technology.
No, it was a secret. Nobody knew that I knew anything about tech, including Leo Laporte, because apparently the story goes, I didn't see this, but apparently somebody had suggested, hey, you should have Brian Brushwood on. He's really good with tech. And he said, well, let me take a look at what he does. And he opens up an episode of Scamschool, and it happened to be the one, Eat Balls of Fire is what it's called. And in the opening, it says, he watches the beginning and it's all welcome to Scamschool, blah, blah, blah. And so then, the bit is I turn on like, so get ready to eat some balls of fire. I mean, fireballs. I mean, just watch. And so apparently he was like, no, we're not going to have this guy on TWiT.
I have a great idea for you. You know that guy that eats balls of fire? Let's have him talk about acquisitions that Google's making.
Exactly, right? So the Colleen really went to bat to get me on TWiT for the first time, and I was nervous as all get out because I was a fan from the Tech TV days.
Yeah,
and it was a terrifying experience the first time, but it was so much fun, and luckily I had the background and the chops to talk tech, and Leo's, and it didn't hurt that I taught Leo how to eat fire. And I think like the second or third time I came on TWiT, Leo started to feel like, hey, every time Brian comes, it tends to be electric. He has something that he brings to this experience, and he wanted me to pitch ideas. And I was like, well, I don't have any ideas. And so it's
a younger and a little edgier of an audience than he's used to. And I think, he's been in this business for so many years. He kind of knows when something is hot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so he asked me to pitch ideas, and essentially I said, well, what, have you thought about doing a show with video games? He says, no, because video games too fractious. It's too difficult. Everyone wants something different out of video games. I was like, what about video game culture? What about the kind of things that gamers like, but not about the games themselves? And he's like, oh, well, now that's an idea. And I went on to describe essentially what we did with the BB Live show. And he was like, yeah, no, but put this together. Let's do it. And so we put together NSFW, and man, it was interesting because BB Live show was starting to grow its own organic audience of people who loved this hideous freeform free-for-all, this sort of hangout where you were just waiting to see what fistfights broke out, or
sure,
nobody knew where the show would ever go. But then all of a sudden we had to restructure it into a 1-hour formatted TWiT-friendly show, and there were some growing pains there. And I know we lost some of the hardcore fans who hopefully later we got back. But then more importantly, we realized that we had to audition ourselves to a very conservative TWiT audience. And there were some fascinating culture clashes early on. It's like there was all of TWiT, and then there was this madhouse of NSFW that didn't seem to fit at all. And it was really interesting to try to massage, to talk to our people, to get along with their people. And it wasn't until almost a year later that we started to see all these interesting ways that NSFW had infected itself into the DNA of TWiT, where jokes that we made up on our show would show up on other shows, or that they would trick people into accidentally saying on there. And now, the TWiT, I would like to think that TWiT is a stronger network for having infused some of our bizarre energy into it.
Well, definitely. And one thing that really helps is that you and Justin are likable people. You when you're watching, you're not thinking these guys are arrogant guys that are just trying to get a rise out of people. I mean, you guys are nice dudes. I was on the show, and I always describe it. By the way. Oh, thank you. I had a great time.
We got to have you back on for sure.
I'd love to come on, but I describe it as this. Whenever people are like, well, what was it like when you were on NSFW? And I say, it's almost like you go in and you kind of have an idea what you're going to do, and you're expecting like a left, and you just get an uppercut to the stomach.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, that's sort of how we we experience it as well. We intentionally go into NSFW with just the loosest idea of where we want to go, and it's terrifying and exhilarating. And as a result, it's highly experimental. There are a lot of episodes of NSFW where I'm like, well, I'll never look at that. I'll never acknowledge that episode ever existed again.
I had that last week, by the way.
Oh no, what happened?
we had my birthday show from the club that we broadcast from every Wednesday, but we did it on Thursday, and the whole dynamic was shifted, and we couldn't get the audio and the video working, and people got a little too drunk, and they started crying.
Did people start crying?
Oh yeah. I got a little mean on the show, and I made someone cry.
We one of the things we do on NSFW is we created our own summer movie league. It's like fantasy football, only it's for box office grosses. And
doesn't Sarah Lane win every year?
What's that?
Doesn't Sarah Lane win every year?
Oh, well, she won last year, and she's looking pretty good this year. She bought The Dark Knight. However, Tom Merritt got The Avengers, and nobody expected The Avengers to be as big of a hit as it clearly is going to be. I think it's going to be #1 again this weekend on the box office.
Oh, it's humongous.
Yeah.
So you go to TWiT now. You're on TWiT. You've been on TWiT since I guess for over a year and a half now, right?
Man,
almost 2 years?
I think even longer than that. I mean, NSFW just hit episode 126, so I guess over 2 years.
So, yeah.
If you count guest appearances before that. So, yeah, coming up probably just about 3 years. I've been either going to the cottage or to the TWiT brick house.
So, technically, I mean, the way you do it is fascinating to me because you're not really using their hardware. You're controlling everything with VidBlaster from your studio in Texas, and you're routing it to them, and they're putting it out.
Right. Yeah. No, we just set up a Skype connection to send everything over as kind of an umbilical. And in fact, we actually had to come up with an even kludgier way to handle stuff last week because Ayaz Akhtar was our guest from the TWiT studios. So we actually took a camera from they used their TriCaster at the TWiT studios to send me their info on a Skype call. I used it to switch live here. And then I sent it back on a different Skype channel to the TWiT studio where they had it plugged directly into the feed. So there was a brief while where I was controlling the feed and like literally they wouldn't have, I mean, I could have done anything and they would have been powerless to stop me.
How have you kept it going? I mean, have you faced any uphill battles with the technical, not necessarily with the audience, but the technical aspect to this? Because I would imagine it gets really convoluted and complicated at certain points when you're doing a Skype call and it's not working.
Yeah.
Has that been a major focus for you guys to kind of get under control?
To be honest, that's part of why we build the DNA of NSFW to be a show that's a constant train wreck. So like when stuff like that happens, people are almost like excited. Like you can, the audience starts clapping when stuff starts breaking because they're like, oh, this is the train wreck that I heard about. It's a little more frustrating on a show like Frame Rate where we're trying to be smart and talking about new media, but everything's organic. You know how it is. It's like you don't just start all of a sudden with a giant, 4-monitor liquid cooled overclocked quad core processor running 18 different instances of Skype at the same time. You start you're like, wouldn't it be cool if I could have a guest? And then you figure out how to get Skype on and how to get the one guy on there. You're like, what would I have to do to add another guest? Well, I can run a second instance of Skype, or I could, run this machine and take an HDMI cable into my Blackmagic Intensity Pro. It's always one problem at a time. The big challenges, of course, are those ones where when we did a live event at Dragon Con, that was a tremendous technical challenge because we had to break down the entire studio. We had to take everything over there, and we had to figure out, how do you do a live show that centers on somebody juggling and keeping the conversation alive while he's live switching to multiple camera and bringing in different media clips to play, but also make that play in a live show. So it's been really, really exciting. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say anything's been overwhelming, but that's only because we've gone a piece at a time. You learn all those individual lessons once at a time.
Where do you've been doing this for a while now. Where do you see guys like you and myself that do this? And we're not, we don't have the multi-million-dollar facilities to back us. Where do you see this trend in internet broadcasting headed? There's more, video quality is getting better and better, but do you think it's going to start fizzling out a little bit, or do you think more people are going to start jumping onto this?
I would not worry about it fizzling out. If you want to pick something to worry about media consolidation, although I don't worry about that, because if the most analogous thing to what's happening right now is what happened in the 1970s. In the 1970s, cable hit the scene, and everyone thought it was a stupid idea. Nobody wanted to get into cable because nobody was watching. They're like, why would we get into cable? That's stupid. And so what happened is it's the Ted Turners who created CNN. Ted Turner's just like, I don't know, take this local TBS station, WTBS, we'll throw it up, we'll call it a superstation now. And all he did was just take his existing content and throw it on there. CNN became the first 24-hour news network. MTV hit on a brilliant idea. They're like, hey, all of these free promos, these are advertisements for music albums. Let's just play those. So essentially, MTV became a network based purely on playing advertisements 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But because they were first, and meanwhile, people who weren't there, NBC, CBS, ABC, none of them, they're like, why? We're broadcast. We got all the viewers there are. It's not until like a decade later that NBC realizes like, oh, I guess people are watching cable. So they create CNBC. And CNBC was just supposed to be cable NBC at first, and it died. It was doing nothing until finally they retooled it, and they looked around and they said, what is nobody doing right now? And they said, nobody's doing business-focused news. So that's when CNBC became a business news network. And so likewise, you see the same thing happening on the internet. Podcasting is an extremely small medium. Still, even now, our numbers are nowhere near where they could be when we get full permeation into mobile devices, onto televisions. All of this is still emerging, which means it's still the Wild West out here. And it's a land grab. Whoever gets there first tends to own the space. And that's part of the reason that folks like you and me are diversifying, because one of the experiments of making yourself a network, making yourself a brand who does a bunch of different things, is you never know which one of those shows might be the one to suddenly explode. I just got a phone call that the folks, I do a podcast called Weird Things with Andrew Main and Justin Robert Young, and the numbers have tripled on this last episode, and we're trying to figure out why. It's these exciting opportunities that are still raining money. And just because other people are cashing out bigger paychecks, and when I say raining money, I really mean it's raining opportunity.
Sure. No, absolutely. Now, the biggest fear that people like you and myself, I'm not necessarily us, but a lot of people on our level of doing this, fear, major networks coming online and kind of taking away the market. I don't personally believe that's going to happen. I think because the way the internet is structured and internet broadcasting is structured, you were able to kind of say, okay, you know what? I'm going to listen to Brian. I'm not going to listen to Andrew live, but I could go and listen to his podcast in about an hour or two. Do you think when the NBCs, the CNBCs really start pushing original programming online, would that take away from what we are doing online?
It depends. The only way, remember that those guys are coming in when there's money there because they hear there's money there. For folks like you and me, the advantage we have is that we are a two-way street. NBC is not accustomed to producing programming that is fully interactive, which is while the show's happening, your tweets are being read, and while the show's over, your tweets are being read and responded to. The internet responds to personality and effort like you wouldn't believe. That's why on the YouTube side, people love your Philip DeFrancos or your Dan Browns, is because they feel a real connection because they've asked a question and it's been answered on the show. The other thing is we have the ability to nonstop program 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The more exposure that you get, keep in mind, exposure is not just like how many people watch one show. Exposure is a function of a number of I guess, total man hours of connection that you have to an audience. And by having a platform that allows you to flip on a camera and spend 4 hours running your mouth off on forever, or, even now I'm writing the Scamschool book and I'm able to live stream and interact with people as
while
they
you're
listen
doing
to
it.
me do the audio commentary. That's something that NBC would never, ever do because it doesn't have a format. Sponsors won't touch it. That's the thing is right now we have the opportunity to do stuff for free with no back end, but only the benefit of increasing our relationship with the audience. And the NBCs out there are not so good at following that model.
Well, I'll tell you, I've met with, I'm not going to say which network, but I've met with one of these networks and they were interested in something that I was doing and I'm still doing. And it was very difficult for them to understand the organic flow of things where I flip on a camera, I turn live and people come and they watch and they were baffled by the fact that you could do that online. And you're talking to a major network. They should understand how this works. They should have, they should be connected to how the internet works. And it was very difficult to get it across when they're like, how do you market it? What do you do? And I'm like, I flip the camera on.
Right.
We send a tweet. We send a Facebook message. And that's all you need to do, really. I mean, you're kind of relying on the content. If your content is good and you're able to connect with the audience, they're going to watch.
Well, it's the difference between grassroots enthusiasm and AstroTurf enthusiasm. Old media is very good at manufacturing AstroTurf enthusiasm because they spend millions of dollars on posters and ad buys, and they put the word out, or they go on the Today Show and they pre-engineer some stunt to get people talking, and then a bunch of people tune in, and then they pat themselves on the back with how much people love such and such show, and then they turn around and cancel it. That's fundamentally different from what we're doing. We are true grassroots in that it's like we're going to interact with you, the fans, directly. We're going to have an honest connection, and there's nothing. The side effect of that is very little is off limits. You can't hide from criticism anymore the way you could, and the way I suppose some of the super famous still can. So understand, we are seeing a difference. We are seeing NBC pushing in, but what they're doing is they're trying to figure out a way to distribute cheaper versions of the same kind of narrative storytelling that they've done on other platforms.
And that doesn't work.
Well, it may or may not work. It's like something like a Dr. Horrible sing-along blog can be perfectly popular on the internet. But meanwhile, whether or not it works, it's in no way competition or a threat to what folks like you and me and other broadcasters are doing. What we're doing is relationship, personal branding that is causing a rabid fan base of people who look to Leo Laporte. He's the one who's first to really learn to monetize this. He understands that he only puts his name on things that he really believes in as far as sponsorship. And in fact, he turned down one of the first sponsorship opportunities we gave him for NSFW. We went, Adam and Eve wanted to sponsor NSFW.
I was that is one of the funniest things you just said. Because I was about to say, was it Adam and Eve?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Exactly. Right. And he was like, no, I don't think so. Just because, he's that guy. And as a result, his hardcore fan base loved him even more for it. And Justin and I got even more worried about the financial health of NSFW.
I would actually pay money, Brian, to see an Adam and Eve ad on the TWiT network.
Oh my God.
I would. And I'm sure his viewers would also pay to see Leo Laporte do a live read for Adam and Eve.
Well, you know how Leo is. Leo can have an idea until he changes his mind. I mean, Leo didn't want me on TWiT until he suddenly did, and now, now he's always loved Brian. But that's one of the great things about being Leo Laporte. Leo could very easily say, "Oh, well, I thought about it, and these guys are really classy, and they really do." What I found out is that they offer 2-for-1 free DVDs. I could totally see Leo pulling one of those. He's the best, man.
He is. No, single-handedly. I mean, he's changed the way internet broadcasting works. This entire format, he's really revolutionized it. Because if you look at what Rev.3 was doing, and they're still doing, it's not really in front of a microphone doing a radio format. And a lot of mainstream broadcasters, which I know a ton of them that have gone online and they have failed because they're using the traditional way of doing a radio show. as their guidelines, and it fails because they're not creating an audience. They're not creating a relationship with their audience. You'll sit there, you'll do the show, but you're looking at the chat, you're tweeting, you're Facebooking at the same time, and that's a great way of creating the community around your show, and that's what keeps people coming back. I'm telling you, Brian, and you do a great show, and we have a nice audience here. And I don't think I'm amazing. I don't think I'm great. But one thing that I've done is communicate with my audience. If I sat here and I never spoke to the audience, and I flipped the camera on when I go live, and I flipped it off when I go off the air, it would be over.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the problem is a lot of traditional broadcasters think that the key is like, oh, the internet is just like doing my radio show, only they can see inside the studio. Oh, what must the fans think to see behind the curtains? Yeah. What deliciousness for them. And then they'll make sure to look extra slick or whatever and be like, oh, they must love to look at me. That's not what fans want. Fans want that wabi-sabi. They want those little flaws that make them know that you're a real person. They want to know that and above all, they want to know that they're being heard. And so if you don't acknowledge them, if you don't, look to Leo. Every time he goes to ad break, that's his conversation time with the chat room where he turns around and talks directly to them. It'll be really interesting to see who adapts to new media and its relentless frenzy of criticism and opportunity and chaos, and who just loves the structure of traditional broadcasting.
Where do you see your show? Where do you see NSFW? Where do you see you as an internet broadcaster going in the next 5 years, other than, Scamschool continuing and you doing the magic? Other than that, I'm talking about this way of broadcasting, this model of broadcasting. Where do you see this going? Where do you see it evolving for you?
I think right now, most broadcasters have pretty much figured out the talking head games. The folks who are doing well in the new media space right now. I mean, you and I, if you structurally look at our shows, they're very different. You got a couple of camera angles, you got interesting guests, you got interesting situations, very, very kind of radio show like. What's going to happen next, I think you're going to start to see interesting opportunities where people are teaching stuff. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more out in the field stuff where people are able to toss to remote live view units, or even, people with their iPhones going out, broadcasting in or Skyping in live. I think that's what's missing from internet broadcasting right now is most of us are building our nice cocoons that we transmit from. And I think the next phase is really to get out of the studio, be able to have more, maybe not pre-recorded, but certainly outdoor segments.
Do you think it's the technology that's kind of holding us back currently?
Yeah, I think it's also the cost of the technology. I mean, the technology is obviously there, but it's that magic $200 price point where it's like, well, hell yeah, I'll buy one of those for $200. Now I can do blank, 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 and blank.
You know what it is? And I'm trying to think back to when we started here. Of course, we didn't have the quality that we do now. Surprisingly, I'm still using the same camera that I had in 2009.
That's awesome.
This is the same camera. It's a Canon HF200, this shot that I'm using. And it's fascinating how it's the longevity of the camera is this long, and it's kind of survived. And it just shows that the other technology stuff, especially with the internet, really hadn't caught up to what they were selling, especially for the consumer at the time.
Well,
we're just now doing good
using Firewire and a couple of Sony digital cameras, but they were standard definition, and they got a little pixelated, and the deinterlacing at the time wasn't very good. So as a short stopgap measure, I bought a couple of $100 Logitech C910s. That was 2 years ago, and it's like they for the level that we're transmitting and the level people watch on the live stream, there's just not a compelling reason given how few resources these are using right now for me to switch over. Now I want to, because there's a lot of things you can't do with these cameras. You can't do color correction, which is why I always look pasty and yellow in this shot, and I always look extra pink in this shot. But I'm waiting for that sweet spot price point where there's some other alternative I could jump over to. Because right now it'd be like, $1,000, $2,000 for me to switch to physical cameras and HDMI and HDMI capture.
Now you're also using VidBlaster, much
yes.
like myself. We both use VidBlaster. What do you think of the software now? Where would you like to see the software go? This is one question I constantly get at the IAIB. We have a great forum there at the IAIB website. You could check it out over there. And there's a debate, if VidBlaster is the future for not cheap but affordable live broadcasting at the house, or is it Wirecast? Where are you going to stick with them? Do you want to see it evolve?
I saw a demo of Wirecast for the YouTube Live, and Wirecast, from what I understand, it's resource very friendly and it's reliable. Unfortunately, it's like I've learned to speak one language that's highly, highly intuitive. The advantage for VidBlaster, of course, is like everything renders previews real time. It's super easy to click on everything. The downside, of course, is it's a resource hog, and it can choke off its own ability. It can eat up all your resources and then not be able to put out 30 frames per second in there. So the question is VidBlaster making the right call by betting, similar to what Bill Gates did? Bill Gates bet that as PCs continue to increase their speed exponentially, that it didn't matter how garbagey the code was written. And I'm not saying that VidBlaster is garbage code, but VidBlaster does, by rendering everything real time with all the previews, take up a lot more resources than it necessarily needs to. But I like it because I like being able to see exactly what the shot will look like. And for example, right now, just to put out, this is a 360p signal or stream right now. I've got about 20 modules open, and to keep everything running, I'm running a liquid-cooled, overclocked quad-core i2700, I think, at 4.5 gigahertz. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: why haven't you gone to 480p?
What's that?
Why haven't you gone to 480?
Well, because I'm dumb. I don't know. Because for the widescreen, like 360p is just 480p with the top and bottom cut off, right? And I like the widescreen. So if I went to 480p, I don't know how that would go.
Well, I'm doing 480. I'm doing 864 by 480.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Now, and so you noticed a pretty big difference for that, right?
Oh my God. Huge difference. I mean, to the point, and this is one tip that I'll give before we wrap it up. I really believe that lighting goes a long way, and the longevity of your equipment really depends on what kind of lighting you have in your studio. We just upgraded our lighting, and I no longer look like I have jaundice. I was just yellow. I mean, just crazy yellow, and I never noticed it until I hooked these two lights up. And I mean, of course it's not perfect, and I'm never going to have that perfect lighting because of my situation here, but it looks so much better.
Now, what kind of lights are you running now?
I'm doing light boxes, like Cowboy Studio $200 3-point lighting kit.
Yeah. See, now, like right now, if you look right now, I'm actually pretty happy. We went through a number of different solutions on the lighting, and this one normally looks pretty good. Right now, you'll notice that that's natural sunlight creeping in from the window I left open. Usually I broadcast at night, so it's not a problem. But with that natural sunlight, all of a sudden the white balance, that becomes the standard. And as a result, everything else starts to look really yellowed out, which makes me look a little bit weird. But that's the kind of stuff I would love to see just processed on a software level. There's no reason that you can't have software interpreting everything and reassigning color values so that you look natural regardless of what kind of light you're in. We do this on the camera with the white balance. Why are we not doing this built into the webcam software?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely headed that way. And we actually, for people are asking, I'm getting a message right now saying, how did you meet Brian? And we met over VidBlaster.
Yeah, through the VidBlaster forums, right?
Yeah,
I posted a question and you responded, and that's one of the great things is everything is so diverse right now that you can have all these little distributed bubbles of completely different communities that maybe you discover each other because you got one who's a fan of both and tries to arrange a crossover, or other of them. But I remember talking to you, and I click over and I'm like, holy crap, this guy's got his whole own studio, his whole kingdom over here that he's running.
And I'm doing it from my office in my house. I mean, and there's so many of these guys, and now because of the IAIB, little disclosure, I'm the co-founder of the IAIB. I think you know Brian, but the community that we're building here.
Can we talk about the IAIB?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm really curious on where things are going in the future. I love that you're creating a standard for a specific subgenre, because you have stuff like the Webbies, which is about the web in general. You got your the Academy of Internet Academy of Internet Program, whatever it is, that the other guys,
IWTV, I think, right?
Yeah, those skew towards very specific, highly produced post-processed, edited content, which is fundamentally different from what's going here. Like, are you guys going to start doing your own awards?
I mean, that's something that we've discussed for the long run, right? Yeah, and of course we want to, and we want to build it even more, and we want to have meetups, and the community. It's very large. It's much larger than people think it is, but it's very cliquey. There are little bubbles that people know each other. There's a little TWiT bubble where and then that kind of branches off into fans of TWiT doing tech shows, and then that branches off to something else, and it kind of spreads off eventually. But with the IAIB, I mean, 100, 200 people I've met in the last month that I never knew about.
So do I have to pay dues? How do I join?
There's no dues, no fees, nothing like that. It's open to anybody that's an internet broadcaster. We have different levels of broadcasters. We have pro broadcasters. We have basic broadcasters that are just starting out. And we have a great forum there. And it's amazing the questions that people are asking on the forum. And it's things that I didn't even know. One post was about buzz, audio buzz, grand loop. And we have a guy on there, Mike Phillips, which is an audio expert, comes from radio. He's been in the radio business since, I believe, the 70s. Mike, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But and he was talking about grand loop issues that most people face, and that's where the buzz comes from. And there's a little grand loop isolator. It's about $2. You could just buy, and it corrects the problem. And I had no clue that this thing existed until I read that.
That's the kind of thing that I found out live on stage, because I run all my sound off of a laptop. And of course, you get into this giant performing arts arena, you plug everything in, and then the moment you plug in the laptop, it just buzzed. And so for a while, I was trying to run it on battery, just hoping it would last the entire time. But then finally, I figured out that little $2 cheater, which people worry about the safety of those. And understand when it comes to computer equipment, because they've isolated the elements that handle it. Like, the worst you could do is if you stabbed a knife into it, maybe it would.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, I mean, this is what we're doing with the IAIB. There's another guy, Mike David. He's a comedy podcaster, Red Bar Radio. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No, but I look forward to it.
Amazing, talented guy. We just connected last month, and we upgraded his video. I helped him out with the video. He invested a lot of time with the video to go HD. So this is what the IAIB it serves the purpose for. I mean, it's the central hub for internet broadcasting, and with guys like you doing the show, and guys like Mike and other people, of course, that we're going to have on the show, we want the word to spread that there is a place that you can go to get your questions asked without really worrying that someone's going to judge you or yell at you or not even bother answering. There's this weird idea in that really comes from radio, where people feel that you have to pay dues, and if I spend hours figuring this out, I am not going to tell you how to do it.
Yeah,
and we want that thrown out of the window. We want it to be an open door for everybody.
No, I have noticed a bit of that, where it's this zero-sum game where everyone's just like, well, if I tell you, then you're just going to be caught up. It took me months to figure this out. Now you just find out. I'll tell you, man, it's like I got a lot out of learning from other people. There's no resource better than that. And one thing I did, I'm really surprised by this. I put together, let me see if I can find it right here. Skype Vid Blaster. I just want to see what the view count is up to. I did, because so many people asked me how to do a split screen on Skype, that I put together a tutorial that now, look at that, it's up to 28,000 views on here. Amazing? And it's just, it just explains here. You can see my old setup right here. There we go. Because it supports multiple callers in at the same time. There we go. This is me. Wow, just getting started.
Oh, look at a young Brian Brushwood.
I know, dude. Young pup with me. No lighting, no background. That's just the lights that are in this spare bedroom. You can see on the old system how slow the BB logo is spinning because it couldn't handle the processing power. But then there you go, right here. But anyway, all of this, it's amazing to me that 30,000 people are seeing this,
and they're interested.
Still getting phone calls and emails of people. They're like, well, how do you do blah? And how do you do blah? And I'm always fine. I'm like, well, first of all, you should know that I don't actually work for Vid Blaster. I'm just a guy who uses it a lot. But here's what I've done. And I think it's great to have a safe place for all those fundamentals to get asked.
That's amazing, Brian. Well, it is time to wrap it up, unfortunately. But we'll do this again, man. We'll do it again.
Absolutely. Have me on anytime. I'm really
Yeah,
excited about what you're doing over there. And I think it's great that you're forming an active community for this very specific branch of people taking advantage of the new media opportunities.
I appreciate that. Coming from you, that really means a lot. I want to let our viewers know if you missed any portion of the show, I know it was a little quick one this week, but I have to go do another show. I'm actually appearing on Studio Tech Live in about, well, I'm a little late. So I should be going
right,
now.
I'll get out of your hair then.
But Brian, thanks a lot for coming on. If you miss any portion of the show, you can subscribe on iTunes. You could go to our website, ibroadcastnetwork.org. It'll be right there on the front page. Scamschool. You could check out Brian with Scamschool. You could check out Brian on the TWiT network for NSFW. And you're doing the other show on JTV, right?
Yeah, well, you can check out Weird Things. Go to weirdthings.com is my current favorite podcast that I do right now.
Excellent, Brian. Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
All right, take care, Andrew. Thanks so much.
And we'll see you next week on IAIB Spotlight. Good night, everybody.